I dialed my son's number for the 5th time that morning, and instead of hearing his voice, a cold, mechanical recording pierced my chest like a knife. The number you have dialed is not in service or is temporarily disconnected. My hands shook so violently that I almost dropped the phone onto the kitchen floor. 62 years of life, 35 of them dedicated entirely to Matthew, and now his number simply didn't exist, as if he didn't exist, as if I had never existed to him. With my heart pounding wildly, I searched for the contact of Patricia, my daughter-in-law. She answered on the 3rd ring, with that sweet, calculated voice she always used with me, as if she were speaking to a small child or someone not very bright. "Hello," she said. I could hear music in the background, laughter, the clinking of glasses. "Patricia. It's me, Eleanor. I can't reach Matthew. His phone says it's out of service. Is everything okay? Did something happen?" There was a pause that lasted too long. Then came that sigh I knew so well, a sigh of barely disguised annoyance. "Oh, Eleanor," she began, and my stomach nodded. "Yeah, the thing is, we moved to a new city about 2 months ago. We forgot to tell you. You know, with all the chaos of the move, Matthew's new job, the kids starting at a new school, it completely slipped our minds to let you know. 2 months. 60 days. 1,440 hours, in which my son had started a completely new life in another city. And I hadn't deserved even a 5-minute call, a text message, nothing. Could you give me the new number?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice, hating that I sounded so vulnerable, so needy. "Oh, Eleanor, we are super busy right now. We'll call you when we have a little free time. Okay? Kisses. Take care." And she hung up. I breathed deeply. Once, twice, 3 times. I left the phone on the kitchen table next to the cup of coffee that had already gone completely cold and looked out the window toward the backyard, where Matthew had learned to ride a bike, where we had planted that rose bush together that now bloomed without him every spring. I didn't cry. Something inside me had broken, but in a strange, silent way. There were no tears for this. Only an immense emptiness expanding in my chest. But before we continue, I want to extend a very special invitation to you. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment down below which city you are watching us from. Now, let's continue. The following days were a blur of silence. Every morning I woke up with the hope that it had been a nightmare, that my phone would have a message from Matthew explaining everything, apologizing for the misunderstanding, but there was only silence. The walls of this house, where I raised him alone after his father died when he was barely 8 years old, seemed to close in on me. I tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned closets that were already clean. I cooked meals I barely tasted. I called a few friends from my book club. But how do you explain to them that your only son, the person for whom you sacrificed everything, had simply deleted you from his life like someone deleting an old contact from a phone? One afternoon, while looking through photo albums, searching perhaps for an answer in those smiling faces of the past, I stopped at a picture from Matthew's graduation. There he was in his cap and gown, hugging me, smiling with that smile that lit up my entire world. I had sold my house, that larger house where we used to live, to pay for his private university tuition. I had moved into this small apartment. I had given up my dreams of traveling, of going back to school, of having something for myself, all to see him succeed. And he had succeeded. He had a good job, a beautiful family, a house in an exclusive neighborhood, only now, it seemed, I didn't fit into that perfect picture. A month passed since that call. 30 days of absolute silence. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. "Mrs. Eleanor Morgan?" asked a male voice, formal and serious. "Yes, this is she. We are calling from First National Bank. We have an urgent matter to discuss with you. It concerns a loan with a considerable delinquency where you are listed as a co-signer. Chapter 2. The Years of Sacrifice." The man from the bank kept talking, but his words had turned into a distant buzzing. Co-signer. Loan. I had never asked for any loan. I had never co-signed anything. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing, while my fingers gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. "There must be a mistake," I finally managed to say. I haven't signed any cosigner agreement. Mrs. Morgan, we have your signature on the documents. The loan was granted 8 months ago to Mr. Matthew Morgan and Mrs. Patricia Reese Morgan. You are listed as the guarantor. The amount owed, including late fees and interest, totals $235,000. The world stopped. $235,000. A sum I could never pay, not in 3 lifetimes. A sum that meant losing everything. This small apartment that was the only thing I had left, my minimal savings, my social security. It has to be a mistake, I repeated, but my voice sounded hollow, even to myself. I'm going to check on this and call you back. I hung up before he could respond. My legs could barely support me as I walked to the sofa and let myself fall. The images began to arrive, sharp and painful, like shards of glass digging into my memory. I remembered the first time I held Matthew in the hospital. He was so small, so perfect. Robert, my husband, had tears in his eyes when he took him in his arms. We're going to give him the whole world, he had told me. And we tried. For 8 years we were a happy, complete family, until that morning when Robert left for work and never came back. A massive cerebral aneurysm, without warning. He left me alone with an 8-year-old boy and an uncertain future. But I didn't give up. I worked at whatever was necessary. In the mornings I was an administrative assistant at a law firm. In the afternoons I tutored English. On weekends I sold products from catalogs. Also, Matthew wouldn't feel his father's absence as a financial lack, so he could stay in his private school, so he could have his soccer lessons, so every birthday he could have his party. I remember the nights I fell asleep at the kitchen table, going over numbers, stretching every dollar to the limit. I remember how I rejected a marriage proposal from Ernest, that good, stable man who courted me for 2 years, because Matthew had said no one could replace his father. And I, fool that I was, thought I was protecting his heart. Now I wonder if I was just feeding his selfishness. When Matthew turned 17 and it was time to think about college, there wasn't enough money. The best universities were private, expensive, unreachable for a widow with modest jobs. But Matthew had big dreams. He wanted to study business administration at State Metropolitan University, the most prestigious and expensive in the city. "Mom, it's my future," he had told me one night with those eyes that were identical to Robert's. "If I don't study there, I'll never get a good job. I don't want to end up struggling like you all my life." Those words hurt me, but I understood them as the desperation of a teenager who wanted more than life had given us. So, I made the decision. I sold our house, that 3-bedroom house with the backyard where we had been happy, where every wall held memories of Robert. I sold it, and with that money, I paid for Matthew's 4 years of university. We moved into this small 2-bedroom apartment in a more modest neighborhood. Matthew complained at first. He missed his big room. He missed the yard. He missed the community pool at the old subdivision. But I told him it was temporary, that when he graduated and got a good job, we could have a nice house again. He nodded, but I saw something in his eyes I didn't want to acknowledge then. Shame. Shame of me. Of our new, humbler life. Of having to tell his friends we had downsized. During college, his visits became less and less frequent. Matthew lived in a student dorm that I also paid for. He came on Sundays to eat, but he was always in a rush. He always had to go back to study or meet with study groups. I cooked his favorite dishes, ironed his clothes, gave him extra cash for his outings, and he took it all with the naturalness of someone who feels they deserve what they receive. It was in his senior year of college when Patricia appeared. Patricia was everything I was not. Tall, thin, with that blonde hair perfectly straight that fell like a curtain of silk over her shoulders. She came from a wealthy family on the north side, from those families where money had never been a problem. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships. Her mother organized charity galas and played golf on Thursdays. When Matthew introduced her to me, I knew immediately that I didn't fit into the world she represented. "Mom, this is Patricia," Matthew said that Sunday, and I noticed how his way of speaking had changed, more refined, more careful. "Patricia, let me introduce you to my mother, Eleanor." She extended her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a soft hand, without calluses, without the marks of years of hard work that mine had. I instinctively wiped my palm on my apron before shaking it. "Delighted, Mrs. Morgan," she said with that melodious voice. Matthew has told me so much about you. But I knew it wasn't true. I could see in the way she looked at the small apartment, the old furniture, the curtains faded by the sun, that Matthew hadn't told her anything, or worse, that he had told her an edited, softened version where his mother wasn't a woman who had sacrificed everything, but simply someone he preferred not to talk about much. The wedding was 2 years later. By then, Matthew was already working at Patricia's father's company, a management position I'm sure he wouldn't have gotten without that family connection. Patricia planned every detail of the ceremony. A historic colonial church downtown, a reception hall overlooking the river, 300 guests. I knew 5 of them. Mom, could you wear this dress for the wedding? Patricia had told me 3 weeks prior, showing me a beige dress, discreet, almost invisible. It's just that the color you chose doesn't go with the decor palette. My dress was navy blue, elegant, the most expensive I had bought in years, but I accepted the change. I always accepted, I always yielded, because I didn't want to be the difficult mother, the one causing conflicts, the one who didn't understand that times had changed. At the wedding, they seated me in the 3rd row. Patricia's family occupied the first 2, a display of elegance and money that made me feel exactly what I was, an intruder in my son's new life. During the reception, Matthew barely came to my table. He was busy with important guests, his father-in-law's business partners, college friends who were now valuable contacts. After the wedding, the calls became spaced out. Once a week turned into once every 2 weeks, then once a month. The excuses were always the same: lots of work, important projects, business trips. Patricia was pregnant with the first, then the second. I found out through photos on social media that I barely understood how to use. When my grandchildren were born, I went to the hospital. Patricia let me hold them exactly 5 minutes before her mother arrived, who immediately took control of everything. I stayed in a corner watching how Patricia's family filled the room with laughter, flowers, expensive gifts. Matthew didn't even notice when I left. The following years were a slow but constant fading of my presence in his life. Invitations to the kids' birthdays arrived later and later, almost like a last-minute obligation. When I arrived at the parties, the children called me Mrs., because they barely knew me. Patricia introduced me to her friends as Matthew's mom, never as the grandmother of the children, as if she wanted to keep that distance well-defined. And I kept accepting it all. I kept smiling. I kept bringing gifts they barely looked at. I kept hoping that someday, somehow, I would have my son back, that he would remember everything I had done for him, that he would value me. But that day never came. And now, sitting on my sofa with my legs trembling, I understood that it never would, because the man from the bank had just made something clear to me that was worse than abandonment. My son hadn't just forgotten me, he had used me. I searched through my old papers in that shoebox where I kept important documents, bills, receipts, certificates, and then I found it, a manila envelope that Matthew had brought me 8 months ago. "Mom, I need you to sign these papers," he had told me that afternoon, rushing into the apartment. "It's to update the beneficiaries on my life insurance. Patricia insists that you have protection too, in case something happens to me. Just sign here, here, and here." I had signed without reading because he was my son, because I trusted him blindly, because I never imagined that someone to whom I gave life could steal mine. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. They weren't insurance papers. It was a co-signer agreement for a mortgage loan. My signature was there, clear, committing everything I had as collateral for the purchase of a luxury house in an exclusive neighborhood in another city. A house where I would never be welcome, a house bought with my future as a bargaining chip. The phone rang again. The bank again. This time, I answered. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand this is a surprise for you," said the man from the bank, his tone now less formal, almost compassionate. "But I must inform you that the loan is 3 months past due. If the situation is not regularized within the next 30 days, we will have to proceed with the corresponding legal actions. That includes the foreclosure and seizure of your assets." "My assets," I repeated, feeling the word burn in my throat. "I didn't ask for that loan. I was tricked. My son made me sign telling me they were insurance papers." There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, I regret the situation, but the bank has your signature notarized. Legally, you are jointly and severally responsible for that debt." I suggest you contact a lawyer and try to communicate with your son to resolve this. Good day. He hung up, and I stood there holding the phone as if it were a grenade about to explode. The following days were a nightmare in slow motion. I tried to call Matthew at every number I had saved. All were disconnected. I wrote him messages through social media. No answer. I searched for his address in online public records, but I found nothing recent. It was as if he had evaporated, taking my peace of mind and my future with him. One morning, after another sleepless night, I made a decision. I couldn't stand by with my arms crossed while my life crumbled. I searched in the yellow pages, yes, I still use them, and found a law firm that offered free consultations. The sign said, People's Defenders, Justice for All. The office was on the second floor of an old building downtown. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed, clutching the handrail. A young receptionist received me with a kind smile and showed me into a small waiting room with plastic chairs and outdated magazines. Mr. Reynolds will see you in a moment, she said. I waited 30 minutes that felt like 3 hours. Finally, a man of about 50, with thick glasses and a tired but kind look, showed me into his office. Mrs. Morgan, tell me what brings you here. And then, for the first time since this nightmare had begun, I let it all out. I told him about the call, the abandonment, the papers I signed without reading. The words came out stumbling, mixed with tears I could no longer hold back. Mr. Reynolds listened in silence, taking notes in an old notebook. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Morgan, legally your situation is complicated. You signed as a co-signer, which means you are just as responsible for that debt as your son. The fact that they deceived you is morally reprehensible, but proving deception in court is difficult. We would need evidence that your son acted with malice, with the intention to defraud you. And what can I do? I asked, feeling the last drops of hope slipping through my fingers. First, we need to get a copy of the full contract from the bank. Second, we must try to locate them. Do you have any idea where they might be? I shook my head. Let me investigate, Mr. Reynolds said, writing something on a sheet of paper. I have some contacts who can help us. In the meantime, do not sign anything else. Do not speak to the bank without legal advice, and document everything, every call, every message, everything. I left that office feeling a strange relief. It wasn't a solution, but at least it was a plan. Someone was on my side, even if it was a court-appointed lawyer in a dilapidated office. Over the next week, I became my own detective. I searched the internet for every trace Matthew and Patricia might have left. I found old posts on social media where Patricia had tagged restaurants, clubs, places they frequented. One of them was an Italian restaurant called Bella Vita. It had several recent photos. I zoomed in on the images as much as I could. In the background of one of them, blurry but recognizable, was Matthew. I called the restaurant. Good afternoon, Bella Vita. How can I help you? A cheerful voice answered. Hi, excuse me. I'm trying to locate some friends who I believe are frequent customers of yours, Matthew Morgan and Patricia Reese. Ah, yes, Mr. Matthew and Mrs. Patricia, the voice said, recognizing them immediately. They are VIP clients of ours. Do you wish to make a reservation? No. I just wanted to know if they live near the restaurant. There was a pause. I had been too obvious. I'm sorry, ma'am. I cannot give out personal information about our clients. Is there anything else I can help you with? I hung up, but I had something. I knew they were in that area of the city. Mr. Reynolds, with his contacts, was able to confirm what I suspected. Matthew and Patricia had moved to the Heights, an exclusive residential development 2 hours from here, where houses started at $500,000. $500,000 bought with my signature, with my trust, with the broken pieces of my mother's heart. I have the address, Mr. Reynolds called me one afternoon. 847 Oak Lane, the Heights. But Mrs. Morgan, I advise you not to go alone. These people clearly have no scruples. But I had already made my decision. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to confront them. I needed to understand how my son, the person I raised, fed, and loved with every fiber of my being, could have done this to me. I didn't go to the Heights immediately. I knew if I showed up at their house, they would slam the door in my face or, worse, call the police claiming I was harassing them. I had learned that people with money always have ways to protect themselves, to turn others into the villains of the story. So I waited, I observed, I planned. Mr. Reynolds had obtained more information. The loan Matthew and Patricia had requested didn't just cover the house. They had also asked for additional cash for renovations and luxury furnishings. According to the contract, they had practically used my name, my signature, my entire life as collateral to finance a lifestyle I could never reach. And the bitterest part of all, the bank had approved the loan precisely because I was listed as the co-signer. My impeccable credit history, built over years of paying every bill on time despite the difficulties, had been the key that opened that golden door for them. The problem, Mr. Reynolds explained during one of our meetings, is that technically they have the means to pay. Matthew has a high salary. Patricia also works at the family business. The bank cannot prove they applied for the loan with the intention of not paying it. They simply stopped paying, and now they are going after you because it's easier to foreclose on your apartment than to enter a legal battle with people who have expensive lawyers. So, there is nothing I can do? I didn't say that, but we need something more. We need proof that they did it with fraudulent intent, a confession, a document, something that shows they knew exactly what they were doing when they put you down as a guarantor. I left that office with a new determination. If they needed proof, I would get it. For 3 weeks, I studied their routines through social media. Patricia was vain. She loved to show off, posting every outing, every event, every lunch at exclusive restaurants. She tagged the locations, posted times, even mentioned what she was going to do next. It was as if she were writing her own public agenda without realizing it. That was how I knew that every Saturday afternoon, Patricia went to the Fountains Mall, a place with designer stores I could never afford. She went alone, without Matthew, without the kids. It was her personal time, her weekly shopping ritual. Before continuing, tell me here in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't click away from the video, because what comes next will give you goosebumps. That Saturday, I took 2 buses and a taxi I couldn't afford to get to, the Fountains. I dressed in my best clothes, applied light makeup, and combed my hair carefully. I didn't want to look desperate. I didn't want her to see me as the victim I really was. I needed to look dignified, in control, even if I was falling apart on the inside. I saw her coming out of a boutique with 3 shopping bags. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than 2 months of my rent. Her blonde hair shone under the mall lights. She looked happy, carefree. Radiant, she didn't look like someone who had just ruined another person's life. I took a deep breath and walked toward her. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned around. Her expression went from surprise to disgust in less than a second, like someone stepping on something unpleasant. "Eleanor," she said, without even attempting to sound happy to see me. "What a surprise. I need to talk to you and Matthew." "Matthew is working. You know how he is. Always so busy." "Patricia, the bank is collecting on a loan you 2 took out. You put me down as a co-signer without my knowledge. They are going to take my apartment, everything I have." I expected denial. I expected feigned surprise. I expected at least an attempt to feign innocence. But what I saw in her eyes was something completely different. Cold, calculated indifference, and something worse, contempt. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, adjusting one of the shopping bags. "You signed those papers. No one forced you. You told me it was insurance. You lied to me." She laughed. A brief, dry laugh, devoid of humor. "And you signed without reading? That's your problem, not ours." "Look, Eleanor, I'm going to be honest with you, because clearly you need someone to say it. Matthew and I are building a life that requires certain resources. His father left us that life insurance, but it wasn't enough for the house we wanted. We needed a co-signer, and you were there, available, with good credit." It was logical. "I am his mother," I whispered, feeling each of her words pierce me like a knife. "And he is my husband, and the children are our kids, our family. You are the past, Eleanor. You are from another era, another social class. You don't fit into our life. Haven't you noticed? Matthew is ashamed of you, of your small apartment, of your old clothes, of the way you speak. When his bosses come over, his partners, important people, do you think he wants to introduce you? Do you think he wants them to know his mother lives in a lower middle-class building? Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but I couldn't stop them. Every word from Patricia was a brutal truth I had tried to ignore for years. The kids don't even know you, she continued, relentless. To them, their grandparents are my parents, people of our class, people who can take them on trips to Europe, who can pay for private schools, who can give them the future they deserve. What would you give them? A walk in the park? Homemade cookies? Please. I would give them love, I said, my voice barely a broken whisper. Love doesn't pay bills, Eleanor. It doesn't open doors. It doesn't get connections. Matthew understood that a long time ago. That's why he is where he is, because he left behind cheap sentimentality and started seeing the world as it really is. About the loan? That's your problem. Now you should be grateful. Honestly, we gave you years with Matthew where you felt useful, necessary. Now that time is over. People like you are no longer useful in our world. Patricia turned her back on me and started to walk away, her heels clicking on the marble floor of the mall. Then she stopped, turned her head slightly, and added, "Oh, and don't try to contact Matthew again. I already changed all his numbers, and if you keep looking for us, we'll talk to our lawyers about a restraining order. Goodbye, Eleanor. It was good while it lasted." And she left. She simply left, leaving me standing in the middle of the mall with my heart in pieces and the terrible certainty that my son, my only son, had agreed to all of this, that perhaps it had been his idea from the start. People passed around me, looking at me sideways, this older woman crying alone. But I no longer felt shame. I only felt an immense void and something else, something beginning to grow at the bottom of that void, something dark and burning that I had never felt before in my life, rage. That night I didn't sleep, not from anxiety or sadness, but because my mind was working in a way it hadn't experienced in decades. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside me, waking up a person who had been buried under years of maternal sacrifice and silent self-denial. Patricia's words resonated in my head over and over. People like you are no longer useful in our world. I got out of bed at 3 a.m. and walked to the small closet where I kept old boxes with documents and memories. I searched until I found what I needed. A dusty cardboard box with the label Work 1985 to 2000 written in my own handwriting, younger, more confident. I opened the box and took out folders full of documents I hadn't reviewed in over 20 years. Certificates of training in business administration, diplomas from advanced accounting courses, letters of recognition from the import company, where I worked for 15 years as operations manager, a blurry photograph from a conference where I, a 40-year-old woman dressed in a suit, was receiving an award for Best Managerial Performance of the Year. That was me. Before becoming only Matthew's mother, before reducing my entire life to his needs, I had been someone competent, someone respected, someone who knew how the world of business, contracts, and corporate strategies worked. I had given all that up when Robert died. The company was too far away. The hours were incompatible with raising a child alone, and I decided to prioritize Matthew over my career. I accepted lesser, more flexible jobs that allowed me to be available for him. I traded my professional identity for my maternal identity. And now my son and his wife had made it clear that sacrifice meant nothing to them. But they had made a mistake, a monumental mistake. They had assumed I was just an older woman, naive, easy to manipulate. They didn't know who I had been, and they didn't know what I was still capable of. The next morning, I called a person I hadn't contacted in 23 years, Richard Miller, my old boss at the import firm. I found his number through LinkedIn, that social network my neighbor had taught me to use last year. To my surprise, he answered on the second ring. "Eleanor Morgan?" His voice said, raspier with age but still recognizable. "I can't believe it. How long has it been?" "Too long. Richard, I need to ask you a favor. A big favor." I told him a summarized version of my situation. Richard listened in silence, and when I finished, he sighed deeply. "Eleanor, I always considered you the brightest person who ever worked with me. When you quit, I lost not only my best manager but someone who understood how business really worked. If you need help, you have it. What do you need? Information, access, and maybe some contacts who can investigate things I can't." Richard asked no more questions. He gave me the number of his daughter, Danielle, who was now a corporate lawyer specializing in financial fraud. He also gave me the contact of a private investigator who worked with his firm. Over the next few days, my small apartment became an operations center. Danielle Miller came to visit me personally. She was a woman of about 35, with intelligent eyes and direct manners that reminded me of myself when I was her age. "Mrs. Morgan, my father told me about your situation. I've reviewed the preliminary contract you sent me. There are some irregularities we could exploit," she said, spreading documents on my dining table. "First, the notary who notarized your signature has a questionable history. He's been investigated twice for notarizing documents without the physical presence of the signers. Second, the loan was approved with suspicious speed. Normally, a loan of this size requires at least 3 months of evaluation. This was approved in 2 weeks. What does that mean? It means there were possibly influences, favors, maybe even bribes. Your son's father-in-law's company has connections with several banks. It wouldn't be the first time they facilitated loans for family members. But if we can prove irregularities in the process, we could invalidate your responsibility as a guarantor. And how do we prove that?" "That's where Charles comes in," Danielle said, pointing to a middle-aged man who had arrived with her. "Charles Foster, private investigator. He can get information that we can't get legally." Charles was thin, ordinary-looking, the kind of person who goes unnoticed, exactly the perfect type of person for his job. "Mrs. Morgan, I need you to give me all the information you have about your son and daughter-in-law. Addresses, places they frequent, names of friends, colleagues, anything. I'm going to reconstruct their financial lives. If there is something dirty, I'll find it." For a week, we worked as a team. I provided information. Charles investigated. Danielle built the legal case. And slowly, piece by piece, a pattern began to emerge. Matthew and Patricia weren't just an ambitious couple. They were systematic scammers. Charles discovered this wasn't the first time they had used cosigners to obtain loans they had no intention of fully paying. 3 years earlier, they had convinced an uncle of Patricia's to guarantee a loan for a family business that never existed. The poor man had lost his house, but Patricia's family had enough money and power to fix it quietly, paying a fraction of what was owed and ensuring the uncle signed a non-disclosure agreement. "They are predators," Danielle said one afternoon, reviewing the documents Charles had obtained. "They use family trust as a weapon, and they do it with older people, people who won't make a scene, who don't have resources to defend themselves." "But I am going to defend myself," I said, feeling the rage transform into cold, calculated determination. Charles also discovered something else. In their loan application, Matthew and Patricia had declared false income. They had inflated their salaries, invented bonuses that didn't exist, even forged company documents. The bank hadn't verified properly because Patricia's father had influence on the board of directors. "This is bank fraud," Danielle said, her eyes shining with the thrill of a hunter who has found her prey. "Documented, provable fraud. If we present this correctly, not only will they release you from the debt, but they would face criminal charges." "How much time do we have?" I asked. "The bank gave you 30 days. 19 have passed. We have 11 days to build an airtight case and present it to the proper authorities." We worked day and night. I, who for years had been just a forgotten mother in a small apartment, became the strategist I had once been again. I coordinated meetings, reviewed documents, suggested lines of inquiry. It was as if the 20 years of professional lethargy had never existed. But I didn't just want to defend myself. I wanted more. I wanted them to understand that they had made a mistake, that you don't judge a book by its cover, that the older woman they had discarded as useless was much more dangerous than they ever imagined. On the 10th day, Charles arrived with a digital recorder. "I got this from a disgruntled employee at the father-in-law's company," he said, pressing play. It was Matthew's voice, clear, unmistakable. "The plan with my mom was perfect. She signs whatever you put in front of her. She's so sentimental and trusting she never suspects a thing." The bank was hesitating on the loan, but with her credit history as a co-signer, they approved it immediately. And if everything goes wrong, let her lose her apartment. After all, she's already old. What else does she need? The recording continued with laughter, with Patricia adding cruel comments about people of my generation who don't understand how the modern world works. I closed my eyes, not in pain, but in satisfaction. They had underestimated me completely, and now I had everything I needed to destroy them. "It's time," I told Danielle. "Let's strike back." And this time, I wasn't going to hold back my punches. Danielle organized everything with the precision of a surgeon. We had the evidence, but we needed something more. A direct confession that couldn't be dismissed in court. The recording Charles had obtained was useful, but a good lawyer could argue it was obtained illegally or was out of context. We needed Matthew to incriminate himself voluntarily in a conversation with me. It's risky, Danielle warned. If he suspects anything, if he shuts down, we lose the chance. It has to be natural. He has to believe you are defeated. He will believe it, I said with a calm that surprised even me, because that is what he wants to see his mother destroyed, begging, desperate. I will give him exactly that. We spent 2 days preparing for the encounter. I practiced my lines like an actress rehearsing for the role of a lifetime. I had to seem broken but not hysterical, desperate but not threatening. I had to trigger any remnant of guilt or humanity that might remain in my son, although deep down I already knew I probably wouldn't find any. Charles got Matthew's current phone number through his contacts. The investigator had methods I preferred not to know in detail. On Friday afternoon, with Danielle and Charles present in my apartment, with professional recorders strategically placed and my own phone prepared to document everything, I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, his voice. Hello? It was my son's voice, the same voice that had said Mom for the first time when he was 1 year old. The same voice that had asked me for help with homework, that had told me his dreams, that had said I love you thousands of times during his childhood. Now it sounded cautious, annoyed by the interruption. Matthew, I said, and I didn't have to fake the tremor in my voice. It's me, your mother. Silence. A silence so long I thought he had hung up. How did you get this number? He asked finally, his tone cold as ice. It doesn't matter. Please, don't hang up. I just need to talk to you for 5 minutes. 5 minutes, son, I beg you. Another silence. Danielle signaled me to continue, to keep him on the line. 5 minutes, he said, and I heard impatience in his voice. I'm busy. The bank is suing me for the loan. They are going to take my apartment, Matthew. They are going to take the only thing I have. Please, I need you to help me understand what happened, how I ended up being responsible for such a large debt. Mom, you signed the papers. Nobody forced you. But you told me it was insurance. You lied to me, son. Why? Why did you do this to me? I heard an exasperated sigh on the other end of the line. Look, I didn't lie to you. You simply didn't read what you were signing. That's not my fault. You're an adult. You're supposed to be responsible for what you sign. But I'm your mother. I trusted you. Did you know it was a cosigner agreement for a loan? Of course I knew, he said, and his tone became defensive, irritated. We needed a cosigner for the house. The bank wouldn't give us the loan without additional guarantees. Your credit was perfect. You've never owed anything. It was logical to use your name. Danielle gave a thumbs up. It was going according to plan. But, Matthew, if I lose my apartment, where am I going to live? I'm 62 years old. I can't start over. I don't know, Mom. I guess you'll have to look for something cheaper or maybe rent a room. There are options. Every word was a dagger, but I maintained my role. And why did you stop paying the loan? Are you going through financial problems? If so, maybe we can talk to the bank together, explain the situation. We aren't going through financial problems, he interrupted, and I detected a tone of pride in his voice. We have the money. We simply decided it wasn't worth continuing to pay that amount every month. The interest was absurd. And well, that's what cosigners are for, right? To assume the responsibility when one decides not to pay. It was so brazen, so cynical, that for a moment I almost lost my composure. Danielle was looking at me with wide eyes, gesturing for me to continue. So, you stopped paying on purpose, knowing I would have to answer for the debt? Look, Mom, I'm not going to feel guilty about this. You had your chance in life. You raised your son. You fulfilled your function. Now it's my turn to live my life, to build something for my family. Patricia and I need that money for other investments, for our children's future. We can't be wasting it on a mortgage that we can simply transfer to someone else. To me, your mother? Yes, to you. And honestly, what more do you need at your age? A small room, basic food, your medications? You don't need an entire apartment. We do need capital to grow, to expand. It's simple family economics. Resources go where they are needed most. And I don't matter? For the first time in the conversation, I detected something different in his voice. Not regret, but something worse. Condescending pity. Mom, of course you matter, but we have to be realistic. You aren't productive anymore. You've completed your cycle. Patricia helped me see it. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions for the greater good. And the greater good here is my family, my children, our future. You already had your moment. So you planned this from the beginning, putting me as a co-signer and then stopping payments? We didn't plan it exactly, he said, and I could hear him getting comfortable as if he were in an office or his luxurious home. It simply emerged as a convenient option. When the bank asked for a co-signer, Patricia suggested your name. It makes financial sense. Your credit was good, you had no debts, and frankly, you don't have much to lose. We do. So yes, when we evaluated the situation, we decided it was smarter to redirect that money to other investments and let the bank go after you. It's nothing personal, Mom. It's simply financial strategy. Danielle was writing frantically in her notebook, underlining phrases, making notes. Charles was smiling with satisfaction. We had everything we needed. But I'm your mother, Matthew. I gave you everything. I sold my house to pay for your college. I gave up my career to raise you. Does that mean nothing? And I thank you for all that, really. But those were your decisions, Mom. No one forced you to make those sacrifices. You made them because you wanted to. And now I am making my own decisions. That's how life works. One generation gives way to the next. You did your thing. Now I'm doing mine. And if I lose everything, then you'll learn to live with less. Honestly, it might even do you good. You've lived clinging to the past, to me, to this idea that we are a close family. But I grew up. Mom, I have my own family now. Patricia, the kids, they are my priority. You are. You are history, and you have to know when to let go of the past. So you aren't going to help me. You're going to let them take my home. I'm not going to let anything happen. It already happened. We already made the decisions. You signed the guarantee. We used that guarantee, and now the consequences are yours. It's that simple. Look, I have to hang up. We have a dinner with investors tonight and I need to get ready. It was good talking to you, I guess. Good luck with everything, Mom. Matthew, wait. Bye, Mom. And please, don't call this number again. I'm going to block you again. The line went dead. I sat in silence holding the phone. Charles stopped the recorders. Danielle closed her notebook with an expression of disbelief and rage. Mrs. Morgan, she said finally, in 20 years of a legal career, I have never heard a confession so complete and so heartless. With this, we destroy them. I nodded slowly, feeling something inside me solidify, harden like steel tempered in fire. Then, let's do it, I said. Let's give my son exactly what he deserves. On Monday morning, Danielle filed a formal lawsuit against Matthew and Patricia with the district attorney's office for bank fraud, falsification of documents, and illicitly obtaining loans. Simultaneously, she presented all the evidence we had gathered to the bank, the false income statements, the recording where Matthew admitted to deliberately stopping payments with the intention of transferring the debt to me, and the history of the corrupt notary who had notarized my signature without my physical presence. The bank manager, a man named Gerald Stevens, received us in his office that same day. Danielle had insisted I be present. They need to see your face, she had told me. They need to understand they aren't dealing with a case file number, but with a real person. Mr. Stevens reviewed the documents in silence for 20 minutes that felt eternal. His expression shifted from professional curiosity to discomfort and finally to poorly disguised horror. Mrs. Morgan, he said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes, I must offer you an apology on behalf of this institution. It is evident that we were negligent in the verification of the loan. The connections of Mr. Reese, Mrs. Patricia's father, with our board of directors created conflicts of interest that clouded our professional judgment. What does that mean for my client? Asked Danielle with a firm voice. It means we are going to immediately withdraw all legal actions against Mrs. Morgan. Her responsibility as a co-signer is annulled, and we are going to initiate our own legal actions against Mr. Matthew Morgan and Mrs. Patricia Reese Morgan for fraud. This will go to the full extent of the law. I felt a relief so deep that my hands began to tremble. My apartment was safe. My little home, the only thing I had left, would not be taken from me. There is something else, Mr. Stevens continued. Given that this fraud was facilitated by irregularities within our own system, the bank is going to compensate you for the emotional damages and stress caused. We are preparing a settlement of $50,000. Danielle nodded with satisfaction. I could barely process what I was hearing, but that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, everything unfolded with a speed that left me almost dizzy. The district attorney, armed with our evidence, acted with relentless efficiency. They froze Matthew and Patricia's bank accounts. They seized the house in the Heights. They initiated investigations into Patricia's father's company, discovering this wasn't an isolated case, but part of a pattern of fraudulent loans facilitated by corruption on the bank's board. Charles kept me informed of every development. He told me how the police arrived at the house in the Heights early one morning, how Patricia had screamed that this was a mistake, that they were respectable people, that they knew important people, how Matthew had tried to call his father-in-law's lawyers, only to discover that those same lawyers were now under investigation and couldn't represent him due to a conflict of interest. They are crumbling, Charles told me one afternoon. Patricia is blaming Matthew. Matthew is blaming Patricia. Her parents have hired their own lawyers and are trying to distance themselves from the scandal. It's a spectacle worth seeing. But I didn't feel satisfaction, only a strange emptiness, as if I had won a battle but lost something much bigger in the process. 3 weeks after the day I called Matthew for that recorded conversation, I received a subpoena to testify before the judge. Danielle accompanied me to the preliminary hearing. It was the first time I would see my son since all this started. I saw him sitting at the defendant's table next to Patricia. He had lost weight. He had deep circles under his eyes. His suit, though expensive, looked wrinkled. When I entered the courtroom, our eyes met for a second. I saw something in his gaze I couldn't decipher. Rage, fear, regret, perhaps a mixture of everything. Patricia looked at me with pure hatred. Her perfect hair was now pulled back carelessly. Her face without makeup showed lines of stress I hadn't seen before. She was no longer the radiant, confident woman from the mall. She was someone scared, cornered. The judge reviewed the case, listened to the prosecution's arguments, reviewed the evidence. When it came time to determine bail, he denied release on bail for both. The defendants have demonstrated a pattern of fraudulent behavior and have financial means, although currently frozen, that could facilitate their flight, the judge declared. They will remain in custody until the trial. I watched as 2 officers approached Matthew and Patricia, how they handcuffed them, how my son, my only son, was led toward the door leading to the cells. At the last moment, before disappearing, he turned toward me, and then I saw it clearly on his face. Panic. I left the courthouse feeling strangely hollow. Danielle invited me for coffee. "We did it, Mrs. Morgan," she said with a smile. "Justice served." "Justice," I repeated, stirring my coffee without drinking it. "My son is going to go to prison. Your son committed a crime. Multiple crimes, not just against you, but against the financial system, against society. The consequences are appropriate." She was right, of course. But a mother's heart doesn't understand logic or justice. It only understands love, even when that love is unrequited. 2 months passed. The trial was quick. The evidence was overwhelming. Matthew was sentenced to 5 years in prison for bank fraud and document forgery. Patricia received 4 years. Her parents faced their own charges for corruption and facilitation of fraud. The family company was under federal investigation. Their empire of privilege had collapsed like a house of cards. I used part of the compensation money from the bank to remodel my apartment. I painted the walls a warm ivory color. I bought new furniture. I hired someone to fix the building's garden. For the first time in decades, I invested in myself. I also reconnected with Richard. He offered me a job as a consultant for his firm part-time, helping to train young managers. I accepted not for the money, but because I needed to feel useful in a way that didn't depend on being someone's mother. One day, 4 months after the sentencing, I received a call. An unknown number. For a moment, I hesitated to answer, then I pressed the green button. "Mom." It was Matthew's voice, broken, barely a whisper. "Matthew, I'm in prison, Mom. They let us call once a week for 15 minutes. I need to talk to you." Silence, a long and heavy silence. "I've been thinking a lot," he continued, the words coming out stumbling. "About what I did, about how I treated you. Patricia and I went crazy with ambition, with wanting more and more. And you? You only wanted love, and I turned my back on you. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Please, can you forgive me? Can you come visit me? The kids ask about you. Patricia is in another prison. Her parents are dealing with their own problems, and I am all alone here. I need you, Mom. Please. I closed my eyes. I heard the crying in his voice. I heard the boy he once was before ambition and selfishness corrupted him. Part of me, that maternal part that never dies no matter how much they hurt us, wanted to say yes. Wanted to run to that prison, hug him, tell him everything would be okay. But there was another part of me now. A part that had learned, late but finally, that love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be destroyed, that forgiveness doesn't require you to become a victim again. That sometimes, justice means letting people face the consequences of their actions, even when those people are your children. Matthew, I said finally, my voice firm and clear, this number no longer exists. And I hung up. I blocked the number, turned off the phone, and looked out the window of my renovated apartment toward a future that was now mine. I am 62 years old, and for the first time in decades, my life is not defined by being someone's mother. It is defined by being Eleanor Morgan, survivor, fighter, a woman who learned that it is never too late to recover your dignity. My son will choose his path from now on. I have chosen mine, and on this path, finally, there is peace. And so ends my story, the story of how I learned that it is never too late to regain lost dignity. What did you think of my decision? Do you think I did the right thing by hanging up on my son, or should I have given him a second chance? Leave me your opinion down below in the comments. I love reading what you think. If my story touched your heart, if it made you feel rage, sadness, or even satisfaction for the justice that was served, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next stories I will share with you. Every week I bring new tales about life, love, betrayal, and above all, about real people like me facing extraordinary situations. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to defend yourself, to take back what is yours, to say enough when life has treated you unfairly. And if you have a similar story you want to share with me, if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, tell me in the comments. Your story could inspire someone else, just as I hope mine has inspired you. Remember what I learned through so much pain. Self-love is not selfishness, it is survival. See you in my next story. Take care, and never, ever let anyone make you feel like you are no longer useful, because you always, always deserve dignity and respect. I learned it at 62. You can learn it today.